My wife cheated on me and abandoned our daughters. Years later, she came back with another man's child, expecting us to be a family. The first time she showed up again, it felt like a punch to the gut. I was in the kitchen, distracted, making breakfast for my daughters. The doorbell shattered the morning silence like an alarm. I wasn't expecting visitors, but when I opened the door, there she was, Angela, the woman who had destroyed everything I had built, now standing before me as if nothing had happened. She looked tired, the lines on her face revealing the years that had passed. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. For a moment, I froze. My mind shot back 5 years, to the days when she left me alone with our 2 little girls. No clear explanations, just empty promises that this was for the best. The affair with another man was the final stab in the back, but abandoning our daughters was the blow that truly broke me. I never stopped wondering how I survived those first months. The sleepless nights, holding 2 crying little girls who didn't understand why their mother never came back. The tightness in my chest when creditors knocked on my door and I had to make ends meet on a single paycheck. And later, the happy moments I built through sacrifice, teaching my daughters to ride a bike, watching their school performances, being the father they needed. There was never a lack of love, but there was a void impossible to fill. "There's nothing for us to talk about, Angela," I said, keeping the door barely open. She insisted. "I just want to be part of their lives again. I've changed." "Changed?" Her words felt like an insult. How does someone abandon their own children and then expect redemption years later? Anger bubbled inside me, but I held it back. My daughters were in the living room. I didn't want them to see any of this. "You gave up on them, Angela. You signed the papers. You walked away. There's no place for you in our lives anymore," I said, before closing the door in her face. But that was only the beginning. A few days later, I discovered something even more devastating. She had never truly disappeared from their lives. My own parents, behind my back, had been letting Angela see them all these years. A betrayal that broke me in ways I didn't even know were possible. That's when I realized the biggest challenge wasn't Angela's return. It was protecting my daughters, not just from her, but from the choices of those I had trusted the most. After shutting the door on Angela, I thought she had gotten the message. But I underestimated her persistence. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my house, her face torn between guilt and determination. "We need to talk, Daniel," she said, straight to the point. It was a phrase I knew well, usually followed by something I didn't want to hear. "About what?" I asked, crossing my arms. I knew I wouldn't like it, but I had no idea the bomb she was about to drop. "Angela reached out to me shortly after she left," my mother admitted. "She wanted to see the girls. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing by letting her meet them in secret." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The memories of the past 5 years, the struggles to stay sane, to raise my daughters alone, were now tainted by a hidden truth. While I was fighting to build a new life, Angela, the woman who had abandoned them, had access to them behind my back. "You're telling me she's been in contact with them this whole time? That you let this happen without telling me?" My voice shook, though I wasn't sure if it was from anger or heartbreak. "Daniel, she's their mother," my mom said, trying to justify herself. "I thought that one day you'd forgive her, and that the girls needed their mom in their lives. She is not their mother. She gave up that title when she signed those papers and left us behind." I exploded, feeling the full weight of the betrayal. "And you knew what I was going through, and you still chose to hide this from me?" My mother tried to explain, but there was nothing left to say. The pain of being deceived by someone I had trusted completely was just as devastating as Angela's betrayal itself. That night, I waited for my daughters to fall asleep before sitting down to think. They had no idea what was happening. In their minds, their mother was just a distant memory, someone who no longer cared. My heart ached at the thought of what Angela might have told them in those secret meetings. The next day, I made a decision. I called a lawyer and filed a restraining order against Angela. I also informed my parents that, for now, I didn't want them near my daughters. It was a difficult choice, but it was necessary. I needed to protect my daughters, even if it meant cutting ties with my own family. For a brief moment, I thought that would be enough. Angela was legally forbidden from coming near us, and my parents knew I wouldn't hesitate to take more drastic measures if they kept ignoring my decision. But peace was short-lived. One random Sunday afternoon, I heard loud banging on the door. Not the doorbell this time, just relentless knocking. I looked out the window and saw Angela standing there with my mother. My heart pounded. I cracked the door open just enough to face them. "What do you think you're doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, please," Angela begged, tears streaming down her face. "I know I messed up, but I'm trying to fix it. Please just let me talk to them. They need to know that I love them." "You don't have that right." I cut her off, my anger rising like a tide. "You left them. You gave everything up, Angela. They don't need you now. Not after everything we've done to move forward." "Son, think about the girls," my mother interjected. "They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to have their mother in their lives." "They have the truth," I snapped, making no effort to hide my frustration. "And the truth is, I'm the one who stayed and took care of them. You two have no idea what that cost me, and now you want to tear everything apart just because you've suddenly decided you're ready to fix what you broke? No, enough." I slammed the door, shaking with anger and exhaustion. I knew this wasn't over. Angela wouldn't give up that easily, and my mother seemed determined to support her. But I was ready to fight for my daughters, no matter what it took. In the following weeks, the tension between me and my family reached a breaking point. My parents, once my safe haven, had become part of the problem. And Angela, with her constant and relentless presence, was a threat I couldn't ignore. It forced me to question how far I was willing to go to protect the little peace we had left. Each day felt like living in an emotional war zone. Every knock on the door, every phone notification sent a jolt of anxiety through me, anticipating Angela's next move. Or worse, my mother's. Deep down, I knew this was far from over. Angela was never the kind of person who accepted no as an answer. Then one day, I got an unexpected call from my lawyer. "Daniel, we need to talk. Angela has filed a petition to reverse her parental rights termination." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "She's trying to do what?" I asked, stunned. "She's claiming that she signed the renunciation under emotional distress and that she's now in a stable position to be an active mother. It's going to be a tough battle, but not an impossible one, considering your track record as a father and her history of abandonment." My heart pounded. Memories of Angela walking out on me, leaving me alone with two little girls, came crashing down like an avalanche. And now she wanted to erase that past and pretend she was ready to be a mother again? It was disgusting. "Do whatever it takes," I told my lawyer, my voice firm. "I won't let her hurt my daughters again." At home, things became even more complicated. My daughters started asking questions. They noticed their grandmother wasn't visiting anymore. Worse, one of them casually mentioned a conversation she had with Angela years ago. "She said she missed us," my oldest daughter confided as we worked on her homework. My stomach twisted. The thought of Angela whispering sweet words to them, telling them she loved them while disappearing for months at a time, made my blood boil. But I knew I couldn't let my anger show. I had to handle this carefully, to protect them without overwhelming them. For a second, my daughters hesitated. "Dad, that's Mom," my youngest said, pointing at her. Without missing a beat, I ushered them into the car, pretending not to see her. "Come on, girls," I said with a forced smile, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Angela was violating the restraining order. This couldn't go on. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I called my lawyer and explained everything. He advised me to document everything and notify the police. "Sometimes people say things because they feel guilty, sweetheart," I said gently. "But what matters is that I've always been here, and I always will be." They seemed to accept my answer, but I knew it wouldn't be enough for long. Angela wasn't just trying to force her way into our lives legally. She was manipulating them emotionally. And then came the moment that broke me. One day, while picking my daughters up from school, I saw Angela standing across the street. She waved at them. Once again, I felt the crushing weight of the world on my shoulders. But if Angela thought she could walk back into our lives and rewrite history, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I had already faced countless sleepless nights, caring for my daughters when they were sick, juggling bills, making sure they felt loved. But this was different. This felt like fighting a ghost from the past that refused to let me go. In the midst of it all, an unexpected ally stepped forward. My older brother, Gustavo, who had always kept a neutral stance in family matters, called me after hearing about everything that was happening. "Daniel, I don't know what's going through Mom's head, but I want you to know I'm on your side," he said. "You've done an incredible job raising the girls. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were a relief, but they also reminded me that I couldn't fight this battle alone. Gustavo started helping out, watching the girls while I dealt with the legal side of things. He even encouraged me to speak with a child therapist to make sure the girls weren't being emotionally affected by all the tension. Meanwhile, Angela intensified her efforts. At one of the preliminary hearings, she showed up with a lawyer who tried to argue that she had changed, that she deserved a second chance. "Your Honor," I said, forcing myself to keep my anger in check during my testimony. "This woman abandoned us. Not just me, our daughters. She disappeared for 5 years, and now she wants to come back like nothing happened. That's not love. That's selfishness." Angela's glare burned into me, but I didn't back down. The hearing ended without a final decision, but my lawyer assured me we were on the right path. That night, when I got home, I found Gustavo sitting in the living room with the girls, reading them a book. For the first time in weeks, I felt a brief moment of peace, but I knew it was just a calm before the next storm. And the storm came, in the form of a phone call from the school. "Mr. Daniel, your ex-wife was here earlier, trying to pick up the children," the principal said, concern heavy in her voice. My heart nearly stopped. I raced to the school, my pulse hammering in my ears. Fortunately, the principal had followed protocol and prevented Angela from taking them, but that was all it took for me to go into high alert. She was becoming bolder, and that only made things more dangerous. I knew I had to take more drastic measures. Aside from reinforcing the restraining order, I started seriously considering moving to another city. The thought of uprooting our lives terrified me, but maybe it was the only way to ensure my daughter's safety. Still, Angela wasn't the only problem. I also had to deal with the betrayal of my parents, the tough questions my daughters would eventually ask, and, above all, my own emotional exhaustion. But one thing was certain. No matter what happened, I would do whatever it took to protect them. The next few days were filled with silence and anxiety. Every night before bed, I checked all the doors and windows, afraid Angela might try something even more reckless. My daughters, unaware of the full extent of the situation, continued with their daily routines, but they were starting to notice my tension. "Dad, is everything okay?" my oldest asked one evening as I double-checked the front door for the third time. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile. "I just want to make sure you're safe." But I knew things were far from okay. Deep down, I felt that something was coming, and I was right. The next morning, on the way to school, I noticed a car following us. A black sedan, nothing flashy, but unmistakably trailing us. I changed my route, made unexpected turns, but the car stayed behind us. My heart pounded. I couldn't risk leading them straight to the school, so I pulled into a busy cafe and took the girls inside. From the window, I watched as the car parked across the street. Then Angela stepped out, and she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize was with her. He looked nervous, scanning the area as if expecting something, or someone. Every protective instinct in me went into overdrive. I grabbed my phone and called the police, explaining the situation. "Stay here," I told the girls, keeping my voice light. "I'm just going to get something for you." I walked to the counter and quickly explained what was happening to the barista. He nodded and agreed to let us use the back exit when the police arrived. We waited. Then Angela walked in. The moment she saw me, she smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was tense, desperate. "Daniel, I just want to talk," she said, stepping closer. "You're violating the restraining order," I said calmly, keeping my voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. "Leave now before this gets worse for you." "I'm not leaving without talking to them," she insisted. And that's when the man beside her spoke up. "Angela, maybe this isn't a good idea," he muttered, his voice uneasy. That was all I needed to hear. Who was this man? Why was he nervous? What exactly was Angela planning? One thing was clear, this wasn't just about talking anymore. That night, I received an unexpected call from my lawyer. "Daniel, we've uncovered something important," he said, urgency in his voice. "The man with Angela today, he's a private investigator. She hired him to gather information on you and the girls. She's trying to argue that you're an unfit father." My stomach dropped. This is ridiculous. She knows what I've been through to raise them. How could she even think of doing this? She's desperate, Daniel. But we have something in our favor. It was something much, much bigger. Before she could respond, the sound of police sirens filled the street. Angela went pale. "You called the police?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You left me no choice," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. The officers entered the cafe, escorting Angela and the man outside. But the relief was short-lived. Even with legal intervention, I knew this wasn't over. Angela was determined, more desperate than ever. It turns out the investigator didn't know the full story. She left out the part about abandoning the kids and signing away her parental rights. He got uncomfortable when he realized what was really going on. He's agreed to testify against her. For the first time in weeks, I heard good news. Still, the fear remained. Deep down, I knew Angela wouldn't back down so easily. Days later, the decisive court hearing arrived. Angela was there, sitting next to her lawyer. She looked exhausted, worn down by her own desperation. When it was her turn to testify, she tried to convince the judge that she had changed, that she wanted to be in the girls' lives to make up for her mistakes. Then, the private investigator was called to the stand, and his testimony changed everything. He exposed how Angela had misled him, how she had omitted crucial facts, like the abandonment and her legal renunciation of parental rights. He revealed that she seemed more focused on discrediting me than actually reconnecting with our daughters. It was a moment of vindication, but also deep sadness. There she was, the woman I had once loved, reduced to a desperate figure, trying to justify the unjustifiable. After hearing all the evidence, the judge ruled in my favor. Angela was officially denied any further attempts to regain parental rights. The restraining order was not only upheld, it was reinforced. When the hearing ended, I felt a mix of victory and emptiness. I had won. But at what cost? That evening, as I walked through the front door, my daughters ran to hug me. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but in that moment, I knew. I had done the right thing. I had protected what mattered most. The days that followed were filled with relief and rebuilding. Winning in court didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't undo the damage Angela had caused, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a fresh start. With the judge's decision, a sense of security settled over us. Angela was no longer a looming threat. I could finally focus on what truly mattered, creating a home full of love, stability, and happiness for my daughters. One afternoon, while we were at the park, my oldest daughter tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come back?" The question caught me off guard. My heart clenched, but I knew I had to be honest. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level. "But what matters is that you're safe now, and I will always do everything to keep it that way." She smiled, but in her eyes, I saw a maturity beyond her years, a quiet understanding shaped by everything we had endured. With time, I began to rebuild a cautious relationship with my parents. The pain of their betrayal hadn't disappeared, but I came to understand that, despite their mistakes, they had believed they were helping. I set clear boundaries. They could be part of the girls' lives, but there would be no more secrets. It was a small step, but a necessary one. Through it all, my brother Gustavo remained my pillar of support. One evening, as we sat on my porch, he said something that stayed with me. "Daniel, you went through all of this and still managed to raise two amazing daughters. That's something most people couldn't do." I think you're stronger than you realize." His words echoed inside me. For so long, I had seen myself as someone just trying to piece together a shattered life. But in that moment, I realized I hadn't just survived. I had built something beautiful out of all the pain. Determined to prioritize my daughter's emotional well-being, I took Gustavo's advice and enrolled them in therapy. There, they found a safe space to express their feelings. About Angela, about everything they had experienced. They began to open up about their emotions, their confusion, their questions. There were still things I couldn't fully explain to them, but I knew we were on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just fighting to protect them, I was fighting to give them the future they truly deserved. For the first time in years, I started thinking about the future. It wasn't just about surviving the next challenge, it was about truly living. I enrolled in night classes to sharpen my professional skills, dreaming of a better job that would bring even more stability for my daughters. One night, as I watched them sleep, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. The road to this moment had been rough, marked by betrayals, losses, and legal battles. But in the end, what truly mattered was that the three of us were together, writing a new chapter. Angela's past was still a shadow, but one that no longer defined us. She had made her choices, and we had survived them. More than that, we had thrived, despite all the adversity. Now, my focus was clear. My daughters were my priority, and our future was in our hands. There was no more room for ghosts of the past. Only hope for what lay ahead. If you enjoyed this powerful story, don't forget to hit the like button to help share it with more people. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories filled with twists, emotions, and unforgettable moments. And tell us in the comments, what was the most impactful part of this journey for you? Let's talk.